This is Embedded FM. I'm Alicia White, here with Christopher White. We are excited to talk to Andrew Bunny Wong, author of Hacking the Xbox, creator of Chumby, and the open source Novena laptop. I could go on and on, but I'd rather talk to Bunny than about him. One thing first, though. As mentioned last week, our multimedia empire is growing. Please check out our blog at embedded.fm/blog. There's neat posts that went up this week. You might like them. RSS works, and we will get a newsletter together soon. But now we get to talk to Bunny.
Hi, Bunny. Welcome. Thanks for talking to us today.
Hi, yeah, thanks. Glad to be here.
Could you tell us about yourself?
Tell you about myself. I'm just a guy hacking hardware, doing the hardware thing.
I
actually missed that I thought the next thing was the lightning round.
That's fine.
Sorry. So what do you want me to tell you about?
If you were on a panel or you met somebody at lunch, what would you say about your background?
This is also one of those really hard questions I never can answer.
Well, I
do so many stupid things.
There's MIT and a PhD and a double E degree, and then there's years spent in industry.
But that all sounds like bragging, and it's like, and the honest thing is, like, after you've been around and seen like these degrees and how little they mean and stupid some people are when they get them, I'm like, the first thing you open a conversation with, I got a PhD from MIT, it's like, dude, is that all you have to like talk about? Something you did like 20, 30 years ago in your life when you had no clue what you're doing and you're guided by all these people in the cloistered area. It's like, if you're, I don't know. It's and then the thing is, I meet plenty of people who just open with that, and I'm like, okay, great, thanks. Now what have you done, right? So I guess the thing is, the one common thread through my life is I really enjoy doing hardware, and I enjoy helping people. And I like to try to do things that combine the two together. I'm such a big nerd that I spent 10 years in college and got a PhD at MIT, but it's not like, my crowning achievement in my life. It's more of like a mark of shame than anything else.
Ouch.
I could have done something else. Like all my friends when started like .com companies and like, started actually doing things for people. I sat inside of like an office and hid from the world, reading about computers.
I was at a couple of .coms. It didn't really help many people.
But you actually like the output of my 10 years was like a book that no one ever read. Literally, it's like this like bound volume that sits in the MIT library, and no one really cares about it. It's pretty pointless. It's pretty sad, actually.
Alrighty then.
I have a whole bunch more questions on this, but I think we should go to lightning round and get through a few things before I come back to.
Sure.
This. Go ahead.
All right, you ready? Ready for this?
Yeah. I'm ready for this. I actually read the lightning round questions ahead of time.
Well, I'm inserting some different ones. So.
Okay. All right. Let's mix it up. Let's do it.
Little or big endian?
Little or big endian? Ooh. Man, I like being able to read the bytes without swap them in my head when I look in a hex editor, but everything I've gotten so used to little endian, I have to say little endian now.
All right.
Favorite programming language?
Does solder count as a programming language or not?
We'll accept it.
It's not. Okay, good. All right. So now I had another answer. Okay, you go with solder.
Favorite processor, living or dead?
Favorite processor? You mean like a CPU type?
Yeah.
Living or dead? Huh. Yeah, I always said that, like, if I had a male child, I would name him Alpha Cray, because it combines, like, two of my favorite, processors. So it's somewhere between the two, the Alpha CPU or the Cray architecture, the original one, the Cray, the one that you could sit on.
Making or hacking?
I think they're like kind of two sides of the same coin. Good hackers make their own tools, and good makers know how to hack things up. So I think it's like, do you like heads or tails? Like, I don't know. I like coins.
Who do you find inspiring? There's a list here, but I'll just leave it open-ended.
Who do I find inspiring? Man, there's a huge list of people out there that do really great things that I have always admired for a lot of different reasons. I guess an easy one is like, Steve Wozniak designed the Apple II, and he put the schematics out there so that I could learn from them. I don't know if that's his intention, but that's what I did. I never asked him if that's why he did it, but he bundled the schematics in a book with the source code, and that was a gift to me, and that changed my life. And so that I constantly go back to that as sort of like a raison d'etre for doing the open hardware and sharing my work with people, because I feel like there's a multiplicative force when you open source your stuff and you share it with other people.
Speaking of the Force, have you seen the new Star Wars movie?
I have. It's great.
Christopher totally rolled his eyes at my speaking of the Force. He was like, that's terrible.
I love the Apple II stuff. I remember all those books, and there were even third-party books that went deeper into just the entire architecture. Yeah. And now that's impossible for most products. But that's the way it should have stayed. I'm actually like staring literally at the mainboard logic schematic of the Apple II. It's hanging on my wall next to my monitors, and like I keep it there to remind myself that like computers are knowable, and the empowerment that comes when people believe that technology is something they can know and not something that is a black box that they can't control.
Are you a morning person or a night person?
I'm most definitely a night person.
So 2 a.m. is night, not morning, right?
2 a.m. is kind of, I don't know. It's like, I'm probably going to go to bed around 5 o'clock tonight. So we're going to finish up, and then I've got to finish doing some changes to the circuit board. And then I've got to like finish a blog post, and then I'll probably start retiring around then.
I should note that we are recording at 2 a.m. Bunny's time, but not 2 a.m. our time. Because that is not, that is...
They have a 2 in the AM too?
Exactly.
All right, one more from me. Is a mobile phone an embedded system?
Yeah, totally. It's several embedded systems.
The only person that agrees with me.
I mean, it's a subclass of embedded system. It's like it's saying as a mobile phone and computer, yes. It's a mobile phone, a communications device, yes. It's a Venn diagram. You're allowed to have overlaps.
All right. I always say it depends on who you're talking to.
That's a cop-out.
If it's not an embedded system, then what is it?
It's a computer. I mean, it's your Apple II is a computer. Your phone has way more processing and flexibility than the Apple II.
Yeah, I feel like an embedded system is when the presence of the CPU is hidden a bit from the user. So like an Apple II features a 6502, or like your PC in your desk has an Intel processor that's a Core i7. That's like a feature, right? A lot of mobile phones, like you don't even know what CPU is inside. It could be some Exynos, or it could be. I mean, Apple of course advertises its Core, its A7 is whatever it is, but
it's meaningless to most people.
Meaningless to most people, and not really a marketing feature at the end of the day. And so, my distinction embedded system is like they're the processors that you don't know about. And so when I say like a phone is several embedded systems, not only is there like whatever they talk about, but there's like the half dozen other ARM cores on the inside that manage the Wi-Fi and the baseband stack, and handle power management and security and all these other things. So there's like dozens of embedded systems inside your phone, in addition to the fact that the phone itself is from what people's perspective, a user's perspective, it's like a beautiful piece of glass that shows magical images that respond to touch, right?
And it talks to space. That's always my favorite part.
It talks to space. Yeah, I mean, it's like we got that one aspect of Star Trek today, thanks to Moore's Law, but nothing else ever came out of all the sci-fi from the 60s and 70s.
Yet. Nothing came out yet.
We have hoverboards. I've seen them.
I've seen them advertised.
Oh. Yep. Okay. All right. Now it's trolling me.
You have a new book on crowd supply. Tell me about it, please.
Yeah, it's called the Essential Guide to Electronics in Shenzhen, and it's the book that I wish I had when I first went there like 10 years ago, and I saw all this electronics and this huge market and all this potential, and you could just feel the energy swirling around you, but you couldn't catch anything, right? It was just like you're just grasping at the air, and snowflakes were falling off your hand, and you're just frustrated, right? And a lot of it was because of the language barrier and the impenetrability of the chaos of the market. And after being there for quite some time, you start to see some semblance of order, some general rules that things tend to follow. And so I kind of did my best to distill it into, a couple of guidelines. I hate to call them maps, more like guidelines of areas you might want to go to try and then reduce your search space from, NP to like linear time or something like that, right? And then also like a set of pages which have technical terms that have both the Chinese and the English words in them. Because the thing is it's not just a one-way thing. You don't want to just talk to the vendors and say, hey, I want a resistor. The vendor wants to come back and say, what tolerance, right, do you want it at? And it's really hard, actually, to do these with any translation app. The technical terms are very subtle. Like, for example, I was trying to translate the word for materials as in like, steel or tungsten, aluminum. What's the general term for that category? If you plug that into Google Translate or any other translate apps, it comes with something that in Chinese means the distinction between the spiritual world and the physical world, right? And so you use the word that comes out of it, and it's like you're talking about things that have form as opposed to things that are spiritual, right? Would be the word that comes out of Google Translate. But the Chinese people would get that you're not talking about spiritual things, right? It's weird, right? And so I actually had to go back and forth. I had a couple of editors who are native Chinese speakers and also technically fluent go through it, and we had several terms that were really subtle and very difficult to translate. I'm still not 100% sure if we got them right, but we'll see what happens when we get in the field.
And so this is a book I could take to Shenzhen, the market, if I was going for the first time, or maybe the 6th or even the 10th, I bet. And if I wanted to go ahead and buy a strip of those NeoPixels so that I could test them out and maybe get a whole bunch later, not the NeoPixels, the 28, whatever they're called.
Yeah, WS2812Bs. Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that they're a lot cheaper there and that they come in big rolls. So I could use this to say, could you mark on the map where you are and give me a business card and tell me what the pricing would be for some things?
Yeah. Yep, that's exactly the idea behind it. You could walk into the guide would give you a general idea where the LED market is. It's the 5th and 6th floor of this building. You'd go up there, you wander around and find some guy who has wares of what you're looking for. And I actually have the word. I would like LED tape, or I would like it in tape and reel, or these, the packaging type you're looking for. And then you can say like, no, actually I want a bag or a box, and can, if the guy needs to get it, you can ask how long it's going to take. It's going to be 15 minutes a day or whatever it is. And then there's a set of maps where you can ask the guy, say you just got lost, totally lost in the market, which happens to me all the time. You just stumble across a vendor. You're inside this building of, just Byzantine passages, right? And you're like, I'm never going to find this place. He hands you his business card. It's in Chinese with like one stall letter, with stall number and alphanumeric characters. And I'm just like, can you at least just tell me what building we're in and mark it on this map so I can even begin to find this again? Because there's like a dozen buildings at least in like one district, and they all look the same.
This doesn't sound like procuring parts. This sounds like playing an RPG.
It kind of is, actually. And that's kind of the fun part. It's kind of a shopping jungle, right? It's not, once part of the excitement is actually finding it and bagging it, and there's such a fractal nature to the market. You can just explore any corner and go deeper and deeper and deeper and find new interesting things. Or you can just stand back and just walk around the district at a high level and also take in a lot of interesting stuff. And that's, I think that's really exciting, an exciting part about it. And hopefully this guide will help people at least save them a lot of aggravation trying to figure out which way is up, right? I know, your results will vary depending upon your ability to patiently communicate. I know that like there's a skill actually, and someone actually had to point this out to me at one point in time. I didn't realize even this was like a life skill. The ability to explain things to people in simpler terms than the complex technical ones, right? So you may know all the knowledge about some subject, but if you can't break it down into the simplest words possible and say it very slowly to someone who's a non-native speaker, all that knowledge you have is almost worthless, right? And what tends to happen when people are talking to people in another language is that the more they go, what? The more they go, huh? Can you say it again? They actually start using bigger words. They start speaking faster and louder, and they get, because that's what you would do if it was another native English speaker who was a peer in engineering. You would get more specific and more precise and start using larger words, pulling from a big vocabulary. In fact, what you have to do is resist that urge and just break it down to the very simplest thing. No, I want the red one. I wanted the capacitor with the dielectric of this particular thing, and that's like no. There's a bunch of blue ones. The red one actually is the one that I want, and that's good enough, right? That got the point across, and everyone's happy at the end of the day. And that's actually something that if you've only spoken like one language your entire life and you're particularly fluent in it, you miss the difficulty of being able to communicate with people. And so the translation guide will help you a little bit. But I wouldn't say you should expect to be like fluent.
Right.
You're still going to have to really use it correctly as a tool.
And yet it's a tool I've never seen the like of.
Interesting. I'm glad you say that because, when I struggle with the idea of doing this in the first place at all. I'm like, I hate building stuff that has no value. And so I want to make the book have value for the fact that it's printed, right? I want to use the medium to turn it into a tool. So like I put tabs on it and I have like business card holders built into it. It's designed to be marked up, and the actual physical form opens flat. You can hold it to a particular page and two people can point it at the same time without like having the screen slide and move around like, on an app, these sorts of things, right? And so I was trying to actually turn it not into a read-only thing, which you just distribute PDFs if you just read only, right? But this is a read-write evolving tool. It's like the last chapter of the book you write yourself. It's a bunch of maps that are empty with business card holders. I write the first 3 pages of the map section that gives you an idea of where to go. You fill in the last 10 pages with like your adventure and your findings, and it becomes your book, your tool, your personal copy that no one else has, that has your ending to it. And I think that's like, if lots of people do that and they all write their own versions of the book, I think that'd be phenomenal.
Well, then I had a Double E friend who, when I pointed him to it, he bought 2, and I asked why. And then I realized I didn't really need to ask. One was probably for work, and one was probably for his own personal projects. And he needed 2 maps, one to leave with work when he left, and one to play with when he continued on his own.
Yeah, that's the idea. The book is actually meant to be a consumable at the end of the day. Pages to be torn out, given to vendors, things to be marked in it, extended, changed. And so a lot of people ask me, like, why do you even bother doing a crowdfunding campaign? Why don't you just make a PDF and just give it to people and whatever? Like, I have smartphones. And like, I don't know. I don't feel like it first, it doesn't have the immediacy that you need in the market. The moment you start pulling your phone and start typing at it, that's like a social signal that you've lost interest in the transaction. And the person you're talking to, when you pull out your phone and start browsing for stuff, they're going to talk to someone else, right? You've lost the element of human immediacy. Whereas if you come in with a book and you're flipping through and the other person can see it, they can stop the page and be like, no, go back. That's the term I actually want, right? It's and the bandwidth through flipping through pages is way faster than you can get through a screen, I think, right? And also just like this read-write nature to it, just that it's meant to be marked up and have things put into it and samples added and things that you can't do with like, a read-only media.
It's like those Klutz guides.
Well, it's like the Hitchhiker's Guide to Shenzhen.
Yes.
Maybe you need to reprint it with that title. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't. The one thing I really want to make sure that it doesn't happen, doesn't get oversold as like an ultimate tour guide or something. I was very careful to stay away from like where to eat and where to stay and sights to see and
that's all very fluid too. Yeah.
And there's also just a lot of guides, frankly, and people with large paid staff to figure that out in Shenzhen. I mean, Frommer's and Lonely Planet, those guys. I'm not here to compete with them on that front, but they're never going to make a tell you what a resistor is in a Frommer's guide. That's just not. That's not material to most people in their market, right? So I wanted to stay hyper focused on geeks who need that little extra oomph, and then they should keep a copy of the Frommer's guide in their hotel room when they get done and they want to get a beer. They can get 10 places to go.
I'm fascinated by this idea that this bizarre style marketplace still exists in 2016 when everything seems to be going to just-in-time delivery and overnight delivery and everything's online and drones are going to be dropping your parts on your front door. Why do you think it persists the way it does, and what makes it interesting that it does, I guess?
I mean, we can start by reversing from the statement, drones are going to drop stuff on your front door. That I feel like that reality is actually a really, really long way off. It's interesting. It's compelling. The story has a lot of good ideas to it, but I mean, it's way beyond the context of this call. Why I think it's socially and also by the laws of physics not practical.
Yeah.
But the things move online that are information based. And purely information based. The thing that's different is that hardware ultimately requires the atoms to be there. Atoms actually, despite us having trillions of resistors on this Earth, probably, right? The Earth is really big, and if we just decide to distribute the world's collection of resistors equally across the Earth in a Cartesian grid or something like that, you're still not achieving a very great density of parts. So if you want to have all the variety of parts, yeah, most would be well, even if you just counted the landmass, it probably still most of it would be in deserts and mountains and whatever. Yeah, there's I think anyways. So the point I'm trying to make is that physical goods still get an advantage, an economy of scale of aggregating in a particular area, right? Because once you've got the idea down, you want to make 10,000 of them, or even 100 or 10, but you need that exact one part out of a register of 10,000 parts, right? There are things like FedEx that can get you stuff overnight from like DigiKey and that sort of stuff that works great in the United States. But part of the problem of like kind of flipping through DigiKey is like, I can only find things I know to look for in DigiKey, right? So if I'm looking for a particular resistor, a particular type, sure, I can do the query and reduce it down to the part that I want to order, and then voila, 12 hours later, it's in my front door for a mere $30 in shipping or whatever it is, right? But, there's something about viewing the entire inventory of what's out there that everyone's making right now, and you're like, oh my God, I didn't know they made resistors like that, or I didn't know they had motors like that, or that's how they do it. That's crazy, right? And that element of discovery and serendipity and that element of immediacy and being able to just be like, that's cool. I want a bunch of those. What's the price? Oh, it's like $60 for 10,000 sold. I'm going to bring these home and everyone's going to love it. Right. That there's something about that really has a value that I think that brings about these bizarre type markets.
That makes a lot of sense. But no, actually the DigiKey is sort of like a dictionary. It's like when teachers said you have to look it up in the dictionary to figure out how to spell it. And my response was always, if I could look it up, I would know how to spell it.
Right.
And so you have to go and see it in order to know it even exists.
Or maybe the other the flip side is you can ask, like, why do we even have grocery stores anymore when everything's online, right? And why do we have fishermen's markets, and why does the catch of the week matter? Because fish, like if you want wild ones, they have to be caught by fishermen. And if you want the fresh fish that was caught that day, it really varies depending on the time. And so, yeah, you could maybe create an online marketplace that lets you know what's coming down the dock, and maybe you can throw it in some ice and FedEx it to people. But there's just something about, if you want really fresh, good food, right, being close to that market is, just reduces the cost of acquiring it greatly. And in the hardware world, where your margins aren't like, 200% like in the software world or something like this, right? You have to live on 30 to 40% margins or something. If you're saving that $30 on the FedEx box or the discovery cost or whatever it is, that's all money in your pocket, right? And that matters too.
And so is this book designed more for professional engineers, or is it more for makers who get the opportunity to go to the Shenzhen market?
Both. I definitely hope that professional engineers could find some value. I mean, presumably professional engineers have translators and experience and cadres of people to help them with this stuff. But there's still times when you're on the factory floor and you need to ask for an oscilloscope and you just can't remember the word. You want to point at it, and that's where it can help, right? But definitely, I think the idea behind the book was, when I first went there, I wouldn't call myself a professional. I had no clue what I was doing. Right? I was paid to be there, so by some extent, I'd be a professional, but I had no clue, right? So for someone who's just curious, wants to learn, and but doesn't want to waste 4 years learning the market before they can get something out of it, I think it's hopefully it's a good deal for them.
Why didn't you go with a traditional publisher? You went with a crowdsourcing method.
Yeah, and again, this went back to me thinking about what the nature of the book is. I wanted to do weird stuff with the book, like the tabs and the card holders, and I know publishers are very cost sensitive, and they already have their printers lined up and all these sorts of things. And I actually needed to sort of get in with the printer himself and see what was possible. We had to go through a few iterations on the physical design of the book before we could settle on something that was manufacturable at a reasonable price. And that layer of putting, a publisher between me and the printer and the pricing of the book and that sort of thing, I think would have limited my creative ability to create the thing I really wanted. And so, in essence, I couldn't have had a publisher if I wanted to do something so weird, right? And kind of break the mold there, which then meant I had to go to crowdfunding to get the minimum order together to make sure I could pay for this weird thing I wanted to build.
When you posted about it in your blog, you seemed uncertain that you would get funding.
Yeah, I estimated that I would be lucky if I got 300 orders, 300 people by the time the campaign was over, which would have got me just to like the end. And I had like this backup plan, what would happen if that didn't happen, and I would like figure out how not to totally lose a ton of money on this. I was shocked that like there was even a response like this.
It funded in less than 24 hours and now exceeds the goal by at least 3x.
Yeah. Because when I did my models, I was like, the only people who are going to need this are people who have A, tickets to Shenzhen, and B, going in the next couple of months. Because if you're not sure you're going to go, you can always buy it later, I suppose, right? You'd be like, why buy it now? Like, cost of capital, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'll buy it after it's funded, right? 9 months from now when I actually have tickets to Shenzhen. So if you look at the number of people who would be going there, who would need the tool and doing it sort of thing, it's pretty small, right? But then I guess if that were the case, no one would own a circular saw, because circular saws are like saws for professional carpenters.
Or a pickup truck.
Or all these kinds of things. Like there's a lot of stuff out there that are owned by people who are, they're designed for professional use, but people like to have them because they're actually really good for doing what they do. Well, yes, you could cut a 2x4 with a hand saw, right? It's a heck of a lot easier with a circ saw. A circ saw is like, $100 or something like that. And you spend an afternoon cutting 2x4s with a hand saw. You're like, yes, even though I only use that circular saw once every couple of years, it's totally worth it.
Exactly. I mean, it's exactly the same point you were making with markets. Having something on hand is different than having it in theory.
Yeah. But, I just had no basis to assess how many people would actually want something so specific. I mean, it's like Chinese to English translations and maps of the market. Like, if you live in Boston and you have no intention to ever go to China, when would you ever need to open this thing up and actually use it? Right?
Actually, I got one, although I have never been to Shenzhen and may not go. I don't know. But I got one because occasionally I can convince friends who are going to bring me things. And if I can start getting an idea of where things are in the market and point to this or that and send them with my book with my help and my instructions. And, if they're willing to play the RPG for me, then this helps. This helps me even though I'm not there.
I never considered that possibility. Yeah, my huge fear right now is that like there's 1,000 people out there getting a book that's not what they think it is. Somehow it's like this do all end all sourcing guide for like where how to find factories and negotiate and all this. It's a translation guide, man.
And a map.
It'll help. And a map. It'll get you on the market and it'll get you into China and back out of China and tell you like what the fastest way to do all these sorts of things is. But it's kind of. It's a circular saw, right? It's not a 3D printer or something like that, right?
Well, you also traded some on your reputation. I mean, you have a reputation for making really cool things. So if somebody else had made this, I might not have jumped right on. But I was like, okay, he makes cool stuff. It's not very expensive. It was what, $30?
Yeah.
And I'm willing to check it out. Yeah, that's below my, okay, the business is paying for it, might as well buy it threshold.
I'm flattered and extremely happy to hear that happened. But oh man, like I think this is actually one of the nice things of working in the relative isolation of Singapore by myself is like I don't interact with a lot of people very, very often out here. And it keeps me grounded. I just keep focused on building things and doing stuff and not so much about doing talks or advising, committees and raising money or whatever these sorts of things people do in the United States, I guess. Right. And so like it's actually it's very hard for me to take stock of how many people would just get it because of reputation. It's almost, it blows me away that would even be a thing.
You've worked hard. It's okay to trade on it a little bit as long as you continue to do good stuff. But
yeah,
so
that.
Funding ends March 17th and then it goes up to $35?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
What made a difference for its 24-hour success? Was there a viral step or a retweet that mattered, or was it just all these little things?
I don't know. I mean, in the first 24 hours, I put a tweet out there and a blog post, and actually, so it's funny. My girlfriend, she does bioinformatics for a living. And so she loves analyzing all kinds of data and patterns and stuff like that. And so she went through and helped me construct a tweet and said, like, look, if you send it this particular time and you ask people to retweet it and you put these things inside of it and pictures and all this stuff, you'll probably get the best traction, right? So she actually helped me craft 140 characters.
She could make a living at that.
to get the maximum impact, right? Because she did all this analysis. She just like pulled like a whole bunch of Twitter feeds and like looked at the most retweeted ones or whatever. It gave me like some advice as to what the right thing to do was. So it was a crafted message that did really well. And about like a day later, completely surprising, Edward Snowden tweeted about the book, and then that just drew the analytics to the roof. It was really funny because I was actually talking to the crowd supply guys, like, oh, cool, like we got the funding, and can I get like some Google Analytics or something so I can like kind of keep an eye and stuff, and like, and you have this line moving across, and all there's like how like the graphs can auto adjust in terms of size, right? Yeah. And so when a big event comes along. Like I was looking at this texture of the data, and all of a sudden everything flattens out, and there's like this huge spike that goes up. I'm like, something wrong? What's going on? And like 20 minutes later, I'm looking through the internet trying to figure out, and then Edward Snowden had tweeted about this, and like just the analytics were through the roof at that point in time. I think that just, that took it to the next level. So it was pretty like unexpected and really, really crazy.
Do you speak Mandarin?
I have had to teach myself. So I hesitate to say that I'm conversational about it. Like, put me in a factory and I can get my way around. Put me next to a girl and ask me to get her on a date. No way I can do that.
How is building things like manufacturing different in China as opposed to manufacturing in the U.S.? I want to switch topics a little bit and go into, for people who have never built consumer products or who have never done manufacturing in China, what do they need to know?
I think, well, the good news is that physics is the same everywhere. And so the fundamental challenges are identical, whether you're in China or the United States. And as long as you have a strong grasp of the fundamentals and you can see through the bullshit on either side, then you're not going to get lost. But of course, the culture and the politics are very different on both sides. And actually in China, it's funny, like whether you're in a factory that's run by, say, someone who's from Hong Kong or who's local Chinese or Taiwanese, has a huge difference in terms of the outcome and the culture and the interaction. Like one of the first things I like to know when I visit a factory to work with is it, what's the nationality of the ownership? I guess it's a little racist, right, for me to make these stereotypes, right? But the Chinese factories kind of run like big extended families. It's just kind of the way the culture works there, and so the culture of the boss tends to percolate its way all the way down to the floor and the style and the management and stuff. And being able to read that nuance and understanding what no means and yes means is no doesn't always mean no, yes doesn't always mean yes. Sometimes it's yes, but it's complicated, or no, but there's other ways to do it, right? And you have to sort of be able to work with the engineers, ask the leading questions you need to ask to get the results you need to get, right? And that's actually the most difficult part, and that's why a lot of people end up getting frustrated, because they assume the culture is exactly identical between the United States and China. That's like, you couldn't be any more wrong about that, right? And so, I mean, if I were to try to sum it up at the end of the day, in America, the primary thing that you worry about a lot is the upfront cost. So it's going to cost you $1,000 or $2,000 to set up a production run of circuit boards, right, at a factory. And you expect that like 95% of them are going to come out good or more, ideally, right, from that run, because you're paying a lot of money for it. In China, you can get your run started for as little as $100, right? Very little.
Sounds like a bargain.
But you should expect that, like, maybe out of 10 boards, only 6 will work, right? but what you do to compensate for that is you order 16, because you know that 6 are going to be bad, right? But at the end of the day, when you do the math, even though it costs like $100 to get started, maybe the cost of the board is $10 a piece. So you're going to throw away 6 boards at $60. You're still better than $1,000 for setting up the run, right? But getting people's head around the idea that you're paying for defective material is really hard sometimes.
I'm having a hard time with it.
Well, I mean, even my little environmentalist in my head is going, well, but you're throwing away, raw materials.
The tester part in my head is going, but how will you detect the defective boards?
That's an extra cost. Because that's going
to take all the time and the cost. Yeah. And so it's not just $60. Right. Yeah, okay.
Well, but this isn't particularly when we're talking about like really early stage runs where they're, you're already in engineering land, and small runs, right? We're talking about, like, when you get to greater scale, the economics shift a lot. You're not, there are other things that come into play. I'm just giving an example of one of the cultural differences. So to frame this specifically, we're talking about like prototyping, right? Prototyping runs in the United States are really expensive. You have to pay documentation fees and operator fees to program the SMT and like line fees. But they do all this upfront work to get the thing absolutely right. It costs a couple $1,000 to do the legwork to make sure every part is on exactly the right spot and you have no problems. In China, the reason why it's so cheap is that's why it's $100 dock fee is they just take your Gerber files, they print it out, and they put it in front of a girl, and she looks at it, and they give her a kit of parts, and she starts sticking them down by hand. And she just guesses where they should go on the board, right? And she's paid local minimum wage or whatever it is, and she's really good at it, actually. Like, she can put BGAs down by hand. She doesn't need a microscope to do it. She's just dropping them down, right? Just like nothing. And like, you can have it. It's funny. I was at one of these facilities like a couple months ago. I was talking to a friend, and how amazing it was that she can put the board together. We talked for 5 minutes. She finished the whole board. We had a conversation. We didn't even get a chance to really watch her because she was that quick at doing it, and the board worked. Right? I mean, but because it's a human putting those things down, not a machine, you get a higher error rate, right? So sometimes the component's a little off or wherever it is, and so but you get to look. But when you know it's a human that's doing it, you know what to look for. You look for components that are a little skewed. You look for some swaps of parts. You look for
backwards diodes.
A couple of backward. Well, they're pretty good. They're surprisingly good about. So they have a methodology. It's not as crazy as it sounds. Like, they actually tranche the parts out in an order, and they only give the operator exactly as many parts as are on the bill of materials. So if they end up with one extra or a short one, they knew they put one down in the wrong spot, and they go back and they inspect and find the wrong one. So it's not totally like the Wild West crazy. They have no process control. But there are things that happen, and if you know it's a human versus a machine doing it, you look for different kinds of problems. It's easier to debug. But at the end of the day, if you send, say a $100 setup fee and 50% of your boards are going to work, right? I think Western engineers would flip, right? They're like, that's unacceptable. Like, that's not possible. But I'm a practical guy. My boards only cost $10, $20 each, right? In terms of parts or whatever it is, for a typical run or something. And then the circuit boards themselves are almost free because FR4 is really cheap. So you just order twice as many as you need. You build them up. If a lot of them work, hooray, you have extra ones for marketing use. If some of them don't work, you have to spend a little time reworking them, and you have a test from day one to try and figure out what's going wrong. And that's actually good to have, because when you go to full production, you need that test anyways, right?
The test is, I said it, I cringed a little bit about the testing aspect, but really you should be doing that from the very beginning, because it makes everything easier later.
Right. But things work so well all the time with American prototype lines. You can get away without testing for a long time.
Until you can't, and then you really regret it.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so the culture, the human aspect, what else would be different that we'd need to think about?
There's the usual stuff, just getting the materials in and out of the country can be hard. There's duties and taxes and customs and paperwork you have to fill. The whole game of telephone and time change and all this things you have to deal with. I guess, people have come to expect this. People tend to forget about duties and customs and shipping delays, but they can be a real headache, and that can be an aggravation. I think aside from that, the other thing to just keep in mind is that China's not Walmart. They make a lot of stuff that goes to Walmart, but they're not Walmart, right? And so you don't walk in with the attitude that I'm going to buy something. If I don't like it, I get a return and get my money back, right? That's such an American attitude, towards everything, right? That I can just buy stuff, and if it doesn't work, I can get a warranty return on it, and that's great that the U.S. has these protections. But China's very much more like a buyer beware kind of situation. Things are really cheap, and the funny thing is one thing that was really eye opening is that people are like, oh my God, things are really cheap in China. It's actually things are really expensive in the United States, because the cost of giving you that guarantee of return is 2x on the product cost. There's a reason why retailers charge 50% more, a markup on other goods, right? The thing that they bought for $5, they sell it to you for 10, because they have to deal with those guys coming back being like, these headphones, I didn't like them. I took them out, I put them in my ear, they're covered with earwax, but you got to take them back, right? And then the guy goes okay, I can't sell these, I'm going to throw them away. Guess who's paying for it? Everybody, right? We all pay for like that convenience.
Yeah, it's like return insurance.
Yeah, kind of, right? But Americans value that guarantee, that promise a lot. And so a retailer that can guarantee a result is something Americans will pay for, right? And in China, they're fine. They're like, just give me the whole lot. I'll figure out the ones that are good and they're bad, as long as it's cheap, right? Because there's money to be made here, right? Like I don't care if I have to buy two of them. If I get twice at half the price and like 20% of the time they're good, actually I'm getting 20% more material than I paid for otherwise, right? And that's their mindset, right? And so there's this, this ends up being a little different because like the Americans like, man, the Chinese quality is so bad. And then the Chinese like, man, the Americans are so unreasonable. They expect everything to work. I'm giving them everything, right? I mean, they should be happy that I'm giving them everything because they get a chance to like get an upside if things went well, right? But instead, like they just want the only ones that are good, right? It's just like this sort of mindset change, right? It's cultural difference, right?
Yeah. Earlier, I was going to ask why you thought such a marketplace didn't exist in the United States, because it seems like something that could work, barring the fact that most of the components aren't manufactured here. And it sounds like this is one big reason is the entire cultural aspect is completely different, and it wouldn't work the same.
Extremely different. Yeah, I mean, it's like one thing you'll see in the markets in China is you'll see literally like huge, Ziploc type bags packed with like cell phone cameras. They're not in anti-stack controlled, foil pack things like they should be. The lenses are probably being scratched and whatever. Like all these horrible things are happening, right? But they sell them by the kilogram, right? And they're dirt cheap and they're actually recycled, right? But the thing is the Chinese people are like, that's fine. I'll build a tester for the cameras and just screen out the ones that are good. These are so cheap. It's totally worth it to get, and why can they build that tester? It's not like they have an engineering staff to do it. They like look up where the camera is made and they call up the factory that made the original camera in the first place. Say, hey, I hear you make these cameras. I would like to buy one of your testers. And how much does it cost? They're like, oh, a couple $100. They're like, oh, okay. I'll weigh you a couple $100. Can you have it here in like a week? Like, sure, no problem. And you get the tester, the same freaking tester that they used to make the original cameras to requalify the refurbished ones. How bad can that be, right?
But where do I buy the tester for the tester?
Tester for you're trusting the factory. At the end of the day, it's not quite that simple. Like I've actually tried to pull this trick a couple of times, and sometimes they're cagey about giving the tester, and so you can come to their factory and see how they test it, or they'll loan you the tester for 2 days, and you can reverse engineer and copy it, or whatever it is, right? But the idea is the key point is that the ecosystem there is so dense that you can do that. Whereas, like in the United States, if you got a bag full of cameras, you can't even find the guy who made it, right? You're just on your own, right? And so, to some extent, in a huge country, which had a huge frontier at the end of the day, and you're on a wagon trail going out to California, being able to know you can buy good grain and good materials from a quality place actually really matters, because you just can't go back to the source and get it like refurbished, right? You're on the frontier kind of type of thing. Whereas in China, like there's just this embarrassing wealth of factories there. You can just go to the source and actually do real recycling.
Is engineering prized more highly in China?
That's interesting. That's a tricky question because Americans don't view some activities as engineering that Chinese view as engineering, and vice versa. Like guys who set up factory lines, are they process engineers or are they line managers, right? And in China, they view it as kind of an engineering exercise to optimize and innovate the process of manufacture. In America, it's seen as something that you have to manage, and it's an inconvenience that should go away and just always work, right? And so America has a very top-down culture around IP. They tend to value patents and copyrights and like the original thought, the person who first thought of jotted down on the back of a napkin and got a number assigned to it should be assigned all the royalties. In China, there's a bit more of like feeling that the people who sit there every day and build these products and actually make it 10 times cheaper than the other guy originally envisioned with his idea. But, sure, it's an adaptation of his idea, but he missed a couple things that were really important that could make it cheaper. There's a value in that. And they prize that kind of ability there. And out here, that's kind of seen as like needless optimization and like boring, not sexy work. Tony Stark is not sitting there trying to cost optimize the cost of an Iron Man suit, right? He's always building new shit, right?
Oh yeah, the number of people I know who leave companies when the first design is done and they're going to go into a cost reduction cycle, they're just like, "Oh, I'm out of here. That's so boring."
Yeah.
And it's yet there's huge value.
Well, I mean, by definition, there's huge value. You're reducing costs, but it's boring. It's a hard work, right? And it's not like, and this is the problem. You can speak good or ill about different innovation models. You need both at the end of the day, but to some extent, like patents these days is almost like you just throw anything at the wall and see what sticks. If you don't know if it's worth patenting or not, if you're a big company, you just patent it anyways, right? Because you just want to have it in your war chest. It could be a terrible idea. You patent it, and a broken clock's right twice a day, right? And
those patents may not get built. They may just be traded for other useless patents.
Yeah. There's the whole troll ecosystem too that comes up. Don't even get me started on that. But yeah, we tend to celebrate like the 1%. There's a survivor bias, right? Like, oh, you should do a startup. Like, people get rich doing startups. Look at like Zuckerberg and like Page and Brin and all these Bill Gates, all these guys, right? And you're just like the number of people you can't even begin to name, the faceless masses of bones these guys stand on to get to the point where they're at, right? Is staggering, right? And there's this kind of notion that we just kind of want to keep running for this thing, and it's funny, right? Like there's some people who really value that, the money and the fame and the fortune. There's some people who just really take pleasure in a good day's work and a happy family that's well fed. And for whatever reason, like I would say, actually more of the Chinese care about, the more humble lifestyle. There's definitely the flamboyant, rich, guys you see out there, right? That make headlines and stuff. But, they can't fill factories with millions of people building stuff, doing jobs that are difficult, right? And stuff, if that wasn't like a pervasive cultural ethic out there, for better or for worse.
I've heard that labor prices in China are increasing.
Yeah, drastically.
And do you think that means that there will be more U.S. manufacturing, or do you think it's just resettling?
Hard to say. I mean, already a lot of the low-cost jobs have already left China actually a while ago. So textiles are all in other areas, and low-value toys have all moved away. You definitely see a more clever redistribution of effort. It's interesting. Like, I think manufacturers are very pragmatic about it, right? To say a trend goes one way or the other because of labor costs, you really have to boil it down to like what percentage of your bill of materials is labor cost. If labor cost is 1% of your bill of materials and it goes to 2%, you're not going to move. Right. And that's kind of the case in electronics, right? Like the value of the goods is so high that an increase in labor costs, doubling in labor costs, isn't worth the effort of moving out. But for textiles, it's almost all labor, right? And so those guys like dumped China in a heartbeat once the labor started going up. For for example, like on the Novena project, I did a hybrid supply chain between China and the United States, right? Half the stuff was built in the United States, half the stuff built in China, and it was all simply based upon what was better for the bottom line at the end of the day. It wasn't like a nationalist, like bring manufacturing back to California thing or whatever it was. It's just there's an inherent value of doing stuff in one region or the other, and I just picked the one that was best. Given all the costs involved.
Okay, I realize that we're like approaching to running out of time, and I've got this whole long list of other things I want to talk about. So I should ask you what you want to talk about. The Novena is really cool. The IP and copyright and the fact that you're hacking the Xbox book is free. That would be neat to talk about. Continuing Chinese economics and business practices, I still think that's really cool. Which direction should we go, given our reasonably limited time?
Jeez, I don't know. They all sound good. I mean, I guess I feel like the Novena story has been played out a lot. So I don't think we need to do another segment on Novena. I've said almost everything you could say about it 10 times over again. I don't, people love to hear the story, I guess, but it's.
Well, the only thing I would ask you about it is if you think about it any differently, given the FBI, Apple security things, and kind of how having an open thing can protect us a little bit.
I definitely, I don't want to, sell the false sense of security that
right.
Openness is the panacea to protecting people, but full disclosure of information and the ability to trade it freely, I think, is a foundation of sort of a free society and people being able to make their own decisions. And also, strong crypto, which doesn't have backdoors, or you haven't created tools to try and circumvent it, right, is also extremely important for society. And so, to the extent at which I feel like Novena empowers people to understand the issues at hand and allows them to understand the technology better, I think it's important. But it's a really difficult problem we have in front of us. The conflict between, the government saying, we need to have backdoors and we need to keep things secret and people shouldn't know about these things when you got to put backdoors and stuff because you have terrorists, right? I mean, it's just this whole, we live in this world of fear and they're just using it to rob us of civil liberties. And that's really sad. And people are kind of more or less rolling over and taking it. And I would like to do something to, make sure that, a generation from now, we still have the freedoms we have today.
Cool.
Well, that sounds like a lead into IP and copyright. So let's go that direction.
Sure.
You're Hacking the Xbox book, which is, I suppose, about hacking the Xbox. It's free and online and by the publisher, which was No Starch.
Yeah, that's right.
How do you make money off of that?
Well, so I guess that's an interesting question. This goes way, way, way back. And also, first of all, No Starch, it was No Starch's decision to put it online, right? I wasn't going to undercut them by putting it, something. Technically, I have, some owner of, copyright-ish things, and but they have to recover the cost of printing books. I'm a pragmatic guy. But if you go back to the origin of it, right? I wrote the book, and I, again, it's one of those weird things where I wrote about the Xbox. It's really about reverse engineering. It's like learning reverse engineering with Xbox as a backdrop for it, right? So it's an educational book. That's how I like to frame it in my mind. And my original publisher, who commissioned the work, which is Jay Wiley, dropped me because they were worried about getting sued. But because I met all my milestones deadlines, they were obligated to pay me my my advance, right? Which they did and let me keep it. And so I took the advance and just printed books saying, screw that, I'll print it, I'll sell it myself. This is before crowdfunding and anything like that existed. So I had to literally running Perl scripts with CSV files to print postage myself in my garage, right? It was it's actually a bit of a harrowing experience packing in 2,000 copies of a book. And that's part of the reason why, by the way, I use Crowd Supply now for all my stuff, because I'm like, oh my God, these guys will pack books for me. Thank God, right? I don't have to pack books after this crowd campaign is done, right? So I appreciate, what they do from sweat of the brow. And so to some extent, the book already got monetized. I feel like all the money I ever was going to make has already been made off that book. And then No Starch, Bill Pollock is he runs No Starch. He is an amazing guy. He's I really loved his attitude towards this. He's I run No Starch. I'm the final say. I have no problem with this. I'm going to do it. I don't have to ask any lawyers. I don't care, right? I'm just going. I think this book is important. When we get out there, let's do it. And I was like, wow, this guy's freedom of the press, right? I mean, he's got balls, right? So I was very happy to work with him to bring more copies of the book out there and get me out of the hell of packing and picking books. The book's been out there for 10 years now, so it's not really selling that well. So we're just we should just put it out there, let people have it, right? The information, there's no more marginal value in selling books. And so even though he had, actually quite a few copies that were still unsold, he decided it had more value being free than being closed. And so he made that decision. And I think that was great.
In my O'Reilly contract, it says that at some point they will open source it. And I could opt out of that. And I said, no, open source it as soon as people stop buying it. And I want it free.
Yeah.
And of course, online, it's already free. Not that I really like that, but with No Starch, and I'm working with them and Bill right now, so I totally get what you're saying and agree. He's been great. It is a way even online to advertise the paper copy of the book, and to advertise for people who, okay, I read it online, I liked it. These people deserve a little bit of reward here. I'll actually buy that, and that happens.
Yeah, no, I do think there probably is a bit of brand building, and just karma points that he's doing, getting by doing that. But I think that generally, I think Bill, really does care about sort of he walks the walk, around sort of openness and freedom and that sort of thing. And that's part of the reason he put it out there when he did, I think. I am actually working on another book with him, by the way. I don't know how much he wants me to talk about it yet, but he's finally managed to convince me to write a book about sort of actually more of a compilation of the writings I've done in the past that would get sort of the all the things I've done in the past around hardware and reverse engineering and hacking, that sort of stuff, and that'll come out eventually.
Aren't you a little young for a memoir?
It's not a memoir. I don't think it's a memoir. I think it's more of I think
first greatest hits record.
It's the observation that I've actually written a lot of blog posts in the past that are they stand well alone, right? And I was like, I don't know, whatever. And then they actually kind of put together into just to see how many pages it'd be. It's hundreds of pages of stuff. I had no idea I'd written this much, right? I was like, I even forgot I wrote that. Oh, that could, we could string that together into something that's coherent and maybe interesting. And so I decided to work with him on the project. It's been fun working with him.
And my book is taking apart toys, where it's sort of similar in spirit to Hacking the Xbox, where it's reverse engineering and using that to teach engineering concepts.
Great.
And they've been okay with me putting the book on the blog even as I write it. They're okay.
Oh, that's awesome.
So cool. That's been really exciting.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, he's super flexible. I mean, he was sort of like the thought did go through my mind to ask him if he wanted to like try to do this crazy translation guide with me, but I just didn't want to like. It would have been. I would have been in his hair so much about like stupid details about like getting business card holders and the cardstock thickness and all these different things that I think he just didn't need.
And notebook rings. I mean, the printers he works with print traditional things, not rings. That's actually very different.
Yeah, it's very different. Yeah, and so actually, the book I'm actually. The blog post I was going to work on after this interview was talking a little about the sort of the process of how I came about the physical design of the book. It's I have this sort of philosophy that you should go to the factory first before you really decide upon the final form of something and see what the factory can do. And so a lot of the features of the book came from touring the factory and seeing what processes they had. They had ring binding, they had gilding, they had people doing die cutting and stamping so they could do the tabs and all these sorts of stuff. I knew, I had like this palette of processes I could paint with. And from there, I tried to construct the best possible experience using the in-house capabilities of this printer and create a book at the end of the day that I could, sell at a reasonable, somewhat reasonable price, given the, the expensive features I put in there. Like this, printers are like, you want to put like a 4-color spread in the middle of the book. Oh my God, it's going to drive things through the roof. Or we want hardcover. Oh my God, it's going to, like these little things, right? Already like big deals to them, right? So putting in like, the business card holders are actually a manual process. Someone, before they do the binding, they have to go one at a time interleave the maps and the cards, and then the card holders themselves have to, all get heat staked and stamped and all this sort of stuff. It's actually really expensive to do that. It's half the cost of the book, and I think it was just driven a traditional publisher nuts for me to make those requests.
But because you are your publisher and you're working with the printer, you can make those demands.
Yeah, that goes back to the real question of why did I decide to go the crowd supply route? It's like I just, I guess you could say I'm a control freak. I just wanted to be exactly, what I want it to be at the end of the day. And I could do that if I self-publish.
So what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a kid? That really didn't have the right verb structure, but I hope you understood.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. When I was really young, I wanted to drive trains because I love trains, But when I got a little bit older, the question of what I want to be when I grew up was, it was difficult. There was a time when I was like, I think it was my freshman year in college, where I had to make the choice of what my major was going to be, and I essentially flipped a coin if it was going to be biology or electronics. I loved both, and I excelled at both, and I went for the electronics path. And I guess I had this sense that one of the greatest tragedies, my observations, about the world, is that so much conflict happens as a result of people being unable to communicate with each other their true meanings and feelings on the inside. And I thought technology could help solve that, like, visualization and telecommunication and all sorts of stuff. So I really, in my early days, I had a strong emphasis on things like computer graphics and communication theory and stuff like that, thinking that we could build products to help connect people better. Which is great top-down thinking, but just like, I had no clue what I was doing. I had no way I was going to actually build a product that had any impact coming from that angle. I mean, it turns out that people, what they want to do, they want to take selfies and post them on the internet. That's a good form of communication, right? I mean, I'm not knocking it. People do it all the time, and I think people feel more connected as a result of it. I would never have come up with the idea in a million years as like, a killer app for phones or something like that. It's just, all you can do is make technology and hope people find good uses for it.
Okay, so now you just had a birthday, which for me is always a little bit of introspection. I hope it was happy. Now what do you want to be when you grow up?
Now what I want to be when I grow up, I want to have health insurance. I recently ran the numbers because I actually have to buy health insurance for a small group of people, and you get these these chart tables that tell you what's going to cost.
Yep.
And I've been paying for a few years, and I've seen that it's been going up like 10% a year. And so I just put in an Excel spreadsheet, like, what it's going to cost me to afford health insurance by the time I'm like, I don't know, 70 or 80. And it was like $100,000 a year is what I needed. Like, I can't afford to get old, apparently. Like, I need to die by the age of 70 or else I'm going to be miserable, apparently. So with that looming ahead of me, I would like to have health insurance. Aside from that, I think I have to say, like, I'm extremely happy with my life. I have a gilded existence. I get to wake up late. I get to build interesting things that matter to me. I get to deal with like good people on a daily basis who are kind to me, and I can be kind to them. The factories I work with in China feel like extended family to me quite often. So there's a lot of camaraderie there. I think, the question now I have is like, what can I do to sort of improve society and help things as much as possible, right? Because I don't have any children. I don't plan to have any kids. So I don't really need to leave any legacy for them. So I might as well just go ahead and whatever, YOLO, figure something out and make it happen. So that's something I struggle with constantly, is like, what is the thing I should be doing? What is the right thing to do next that will help the most people and not unintentionally hurt people? Because I didn't see the unforeseen consequences of it.
That's a tough battle with yourself to try to figure that out and to try to find a path.
It is. The best thing I can do is iterate.
Yeah.
And the problem is, like, I just turned 41, and I'm just like, I look back, and if I look kind of back at the trends, it takes me about 4 to 5 years to do a major project from start to finish. And I figure by the age of 50, I'm not going to have the health that I have now. So I maybe have 2 more chances to do something really big. And so it's really starting to get to the point where I should really, stop just farting around and building laptops because I think it'd be fun. And maybe actually doing something that helps people. I don't know. I haven't figured out what it is, but I'm working on it.
Well, I think you're being too hard on yourself, but I want to look forward to what you're doing. So get to it. And this actually seems like a pretty good place to stop or to restart and to just ask you a whole bunch more questions. But I think we're out of time.
Sure.
Do you have any last thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
Oh, man, I think I put all my last thoughts into your questions. Sorry, go ahead.
That's totally fine. This isn't a required question.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, the default platitude I was going to throw was about the cultural differences between working in U.S. and China, but you guys already covered that. So, and then you kind of like ended on this question of what I want to do when I grow up. Like, I don't know, I want to help people somehow in a way that's meaningful and useful, doesn't accidentally hurt people. I don't know. I don't have anything else.
My resume actually has an objective, which is one of those things that people say you shouldn't put on your resume anymore. It's out of fad or whatever. And it's
really? Oh, Jesus.
To make interesting gizmos that make the world a better place. And yes. If I send my resume to places, which I don't do all that often anymore, but when I did, 70% of them would be like, you shouldn't put an objective and why that? And the other 30% would be, yeah, okay, come work here. Because there are people who get it and who understand that making the world a better place is a very reasonable objective for an engineer. We have so much power to build this stuff. It's just amazing and awesome. And I'm happy to hear it from you because I think you can do some pretty cool stuff.
Oh, good. Well, I hope I don't let you down.
You should also have some fun too, because that's where the fun stuff, that's where the good stuff actually happens.
Oh, I have plenty of fun. I'm like I said, I can't complain on my lifestyle. I picked short-term small happinesses over the long-term bet. Like, I'm not doing the big companies and the long slog and no golden handcuffs or stock options to earn off or whatever it is. It's very day by day for me. And so you just sort of, when an opportunity comes along and there's like some guy with free beer, you hang out with them and you drink all night and you have a good time. And then next morning you work off the hangover and get back to work. It's great. Can't ask for anything more.
My guest has been Andrew Bunny Wong. His business cards say Ronin, which seems appropriate. His new book is The Essential Guide to Electronics in Shenzhen. You can pre-order at Crowd Supply. There'll be a link in the show notes, of course, and I did buy mine. Thank you, Bunny, for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you also to Christopher for producing and co-hosting, and of course, thank you for listening. Hit the contact link on Embedded FM if you'd like to say hello. Check out embedded.fm/blog if you want to know more about some topics. I don't know what they'll be this week, but you can know more about some topics. Or you can email us show@embedded.fm. We'll be here next week. In the meantime, a final thought to leave you with. This one's from Shel Silverstein. Listen to the mustn'ts, child. Listen to the don'ts. Listen to the shouldn'ts, the impossibles, the won'ts. Listen to the never haves, then listen close to me. Anything can happen, child. Anything can be. Embedded FM is an independently produced radio show that focuses on the many aspects of engineering. It is a production of Logical Elegance, an embedded software consulting company in California. If there are advertisements in the show, we did not put them there and do not receive any revenue from them. At this time, our sole sponsor remains Logical Elegance.